Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Once again, I am just always in awe that anybody shows up to this. So thank you for being here. So just to get us started while some more people join us, in the comments, I would love to hear, when are you out for Thanksgiving break? So if you're still in school, let me know when your last day is before Thanksgiving break. If you're a parent, let me know when your kiddo's last day is. I know that for me, we go to school this week and then we have Monday and Tuesdays an early release day for the kiddos. So I'd love to know what you guys have going on. Last day is Tuesday. I've heard a lot of people getting all next week off. And so I just need to know if I needed to be jealous of anybody. All right, Kimberly, it looks like it's just you and I today. Oh, hey, Bobby. Hey, Jessica. Hi, Sarah. Okay. All right. All you people who are off on Friday, that just doesn't seem fair. All right, it is 7:31, so I am going to go ahead and get started because, if you know me in real life, I like to start and end on time. But I do have to point out that I wore this awesome shirt for this one tonight. I thought it was appropriate. A-E-I-O-U and sometimes Y, and then the back of it says, and sometimes W, because yes, W can be a vowel sometimes. All right, friends, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this party started. All right, tonight we are talking about phonics rules and phonics generalizations. And I really designed this tonight to be more of an opportunity, not so much for me to give you like specific activities for you to do with your children, but I really wanted to give you like the verbiage and the understanding and the teacher knowledge about different phonics rules. Because for most of us, we grew up with basic spelling lists as students. And then when we got to college, we were never actually taught the phonics rules. It wasn't until I was Orton Gillingham trained that I even became aware of the fact that English actually made sense. And we always hear how English doesn't make any sense, but we know that actually about 96% of English words can be decoded with simple rules, and 50% of the words can be decoded through sound symbol correspondence alone. So with a couple of simple rules, we can make such a big impact for our children. And I really hope that this will be helpful for both teachers and parents, because I know a lot of times kiddos will come home with their words. And as parents, we're like, what in the world is this? Like, somebody just tell me what you want from me. All right. Hey, Lindsay, I'm glad you made it. So there are two books that I think are infinitely helpful in understanding phonics rules and phonics generalizations. I'm actually going to do a giveaway for both of these at the end of this evening, so just hang around. Uncovering the Logic of English is more of a narrative. So she goes through these 30 rules, and basically with the 30 different rules, it will take you through all of the English language. So that one's more of a narrative. It's very easy to read. The ABCs and all their tricks is a little different though. Excuse me. It's like it says, it's just a reference book. So it has like lists of words and lists of sounds. If you follow me on Instagram, it's where I got my question about how many words make the sh sound, but is spelled with a CH. So it's that kind of thing. If I had to choose one, I would probably choose Uncovering the Logic of English, because I think it's more easier to read. Like you can pick it up and read it from beginning to end, but they're both really valuable. So what are we going to do tonight? We're going to do a couple of things. We're going to identify the phonics generalizations and rules in ways that we can explain to our own students or our own children. And then we're going to discuss a couple of different ways that we can help children to internalize those generalizations. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with something that has plagued us for forever. We all know that we have kiddos who say cat is spelled K-A-T, and you just like stop, that's not it. But there actually is a rule for when we use K and when we use C to represent the K sound at the beginning of a word. This is what I want you to remember. If the K sound is followed by an I or an E, we're going to use a K. If the K sound is followed by O, U, or A, we're going to use a C. In my Orton Gillingham training, they taught us this little like jingle. K takes I and E, C takes the other three. And we'll see later why K has to represent those sounds, but for right now, just keep that in mind. So kid, the K sound is followed by an I, so we have to use a K. Catch, the K sound is followed by an A, so we have to use a C. Cut, K is followed by an so we have to use a C. So another thing that I want to point out is I've noticed that it's generally the kids are misusing K instead of C. And I think when you think about the actual names of the letters, that makes a lot of sense, right? So when you say the name of the letter, like C makes a sound when you say the name. K starts with the K sound. So if you're a child, it makes a lot of sense that when you hear K sound, you're going to write a K. So with this simple rule, I think we can really help to explain a lot of those early misconceptions about K versus C. I wanted to mention, I should have mentioned this before, at any point, if you are not sure about a word, if you're like, hey, what about this word? I do not mind. Please put it into the chat. I might know the answer to it. I might not. So a really obvious example of something that doesn't make sense. Every time, sorry, bleh, I was reading a comment and lost my train of thought. So one immediate exception that I can think of is the word kangaroo, because kangaroo is K-A, but kangaroo is not an English word. It is of Australian origin, so that's why it doesn't have to follow that rule. Okay, now we're going to talk about digraphs. And if you are the lady that I was talking to at lunch today, I am especially talking to you. So when two consonants make one sound, we call that a digraph. I do teach my children that term. So when I'm going through my sound decks, we'll say, like, say we get to the SH, they'll say sh, and then I say a digraph is when two consonants make, and they have to say one sound. And then I'll say when two consonants make one sound, it is called a, and they say digraph. So the easiest digraph to me, and this is the order that I teach them in, is the SH. The SH representing the sh sound. It's easy. It pretty much stays the same. There aren't really funky things that happen with it. It can be used at the beginning or the end. After that, I teach my children the CH representing the ch sound. Now, TH is where it gets a little bit hairy, because TH actually has two sounds. TH has a voiced and a voiceless sound. I'm going to ask you to do what I have my kiddos do, and that is to put your hands over your ears and make the sound. Now make the sound. Can you feel the difference? So the difference, when you put your hands over your ears like that, you can really hear how one of them is voiceless and one of them is voiced. So TH can represent either one of those sounds. It's made in the same part of your mouth. It's just the way, just whether or not we're using our vocal cords that makes a difference. What I find is really tricky with TH is you have a lot of children who will do instead of TH. And I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can show you my mouth. When I have children who say like whiff, they're making a sound instead of the sound. We talk about what our mouths do. So I will tell them for TH, you stick your tongue in between your teeth and go, but the F sound is made when you have your lip in between your teeth and go. They're both made in the front part of our mouth, but the way that we articulate it is different. So if you have that confusion, I think that's a really good time to bring out the mirrors and show them what your mouth is doing when you're making that TH sound. Yes, Sandra, also having the kiddos put their hands on their vocal cords to help understand the difference between voiced and voiceless. There are a lot of different consonants that are voiced or voiceless. All of our vowels are voiced. All of them use our vocal cords. Some, if we can go ahead and practice a couple of them. So there's also a voiced voiceless pair with s. So if you say s, it's voiceless. But if you say z, it's made in the same part of your mouth. It just happens to be voiced. All right, so let's go back to digraphs now. And then the last digraph, which if it just erased itself off planet Earth, I wouldn't be too sad, is WH. Technically, WH says huh, huh. Okay, and I probably butchered it, but I live in a part of the country in the United States where WH is virtually indistinguishable from W. I would love to know, like, if you could put in the comments where you live, do you have a difference between WH and W? Like, I know some people, like, I say whip, some people say whip. So I would love to know if you actually hear a difference. I do not spend a lot of time on WH. I introduce it for reading, but I do not spend a whole bunch of time focusing on it because there's just not that many words. And from where I'm at, it's just not even distinguishable. So I see someone says there's no difference, no difference, no difference. See, like this is the kind of change.org position or change.org petition we need. Let's get rid of the WH digraph. Oh, and one last thought. CK can also technically be considered a digraph. You have two consonants that make one sound. So some people say it's not a digraph, but for simplicity's sake, I would include CK. There's a couple of other ones that you can do, like FH represents, but that's you don't need to worry about that right at the beginning. That's a Greek thing. So basically no difference in the United States. I think in Australia, there might be a WHW difference. I have a friend in Australia and I have messaged her and asked her to say words for me before. Now, after digraphs, I typically teach blends. There's a big debate about whether or not we should teach blends. And if you don't believe the same thing that I do, that is perfectly fine. I do explicitly teach blends. If I don't, I find that my children don't get it. I find that they're often missing that second sound in a blend. So I do teach them. Saxon Phonics teaches PH before CH. That is bonkers to me. All right, so what is a blend? Unlike a digraph, where two consonants make one sound, a blend is where you have two consonants, but they make separate sounds. They keep their own sounds. They can kind of be organized into three big groups: S blends, L blends, and R blends. I think the trouble comes if we spend week after week after week after week on blends and we don't get anywhere else. We cannot spend an entire quarter teaching children blends, but I do think it's worthwhile to spend some time. So I will teach my children S blends. That's things like ST, SP, SK, SN. And then I will teach them L blends, and then R blends, DR, CR, TR, FR. So the trickiest ones for kiddos are those R blends because there's something called co-articulation going on. When you have two letters that are next to each other, they can alter their sounds. So we don't say d or we say drum. So you will definitely have kiddos who are going to write JRUM for drum. And when we do that, what I do is I take the sounds apart and then we practice blending them back together to see how our mouths change it to that sound. So I will say d, let's blend it, drum, drum. And the same thing with TR. TR can often sound like CHR. And so you just have to have a lot of explicit instruction and practice in those. So there are another type of blend, and those are blends at the end. They're not as numerous as the S, L, and R blends, but they are worthwhile. There is a bunch of them, and it is worthwhile to teach. Please pop in with a question at any time. I know that I'm going over a lot of information, but after this, I'm going to upload this presentation to the Google Drive, and you will have access to the video and the presentation whenever you want it. Okay, Magic E. There was a request for me to talk about the different uses of a silent E. The most common use of a silent E, about 50% of the time, is to add it to the end of a closed syllable to make a vowel say its name. Okay, so Jamie, can you explain a little bit more what you mean? So if I have the word tap and I add an E to the end, it can jump over one and only one letter to make a vowel say its name. So tap would become tape. Someone just had a really good question in the chat, so I'm going to go back for a second. They asked if NK and NG are considered blends. NG, like in sing, is considered a digraph. NK is considered a blend. I know that it's tricky because if we say sing, we feel like we can hear each sound, but it is a little bit different. So NG is one sound. So Magic E. You can add an E to the end of a closed syllable. The E can jump over one letter to make a vowel say its name. What I like to do with this is I like to tap out a word, like we will tap out tap and we'll say t, ah. Okay, how many sounds are in tap? There's 3. And then I'll say, okay, well, let's write it. And then let's say the word tape. Tap it out to a. All right, now let's write it. Okay, this has 3 sounds and it can't be tap or it can't be TAP because we just said that that was tap. So there has to be something different that we can do. So we add that silent E to the end so that we can make a vowel say its name. This is also a really good time for you to teach children that a long U can make 2 sounds. So when I'm teaching my children about magic E, we will say U, consonant E can say U or U, or can represent U or U. It's really important for them to know that it can make multiple sounds because otherwise they get confused. So K-ube and fla-oot, those are 2 different sounds of that long U. All right, this is one that I know a lot of people want to hear about. When we have a ch sound, we have 2 options. We can use a CH or we can use a TCH. So when do we know which one to use? Well, if you hear the ch sound right after a short vowel, we use the longer spelling. In OG class, I was taught we use the long spelling right after a short vowel. So let's look at some examples. Batch, witch, hutch. All 3 of those, you hear the ch right after a short vowel. So we use the longer spelling. But then if you look at lunch and branch, they do have a short vowel, but the ch sound is not right after. So when I'm going over like words with kids and they read lunch, I'll say something like, well, why is it a CH and not a TCH? And they'll tell me, oh, well, the N is blocking it, so it can't be a TCH. And this is also a good place to point out that CH is the only one that can be at the beginning of a word. So TCH has to come after a short vowel. So if you hear ch sound in the beginning, you only have one option. So CH versus TCH, we use the long spelling when it comes right after a short vowel. Now, what is great is we have the exact same rule for k. So we've already talked about K and C at the beginning of a word, but what about when we hear it elsewhere in a word? Well, we really have 2 options right here. We have a k that is spelled with a K or a CK. And once again, we are going to use the long spelling when it comes right after a short vowel. So stack, the k comes after a short A. Now flake, it comes right after a vowel, but it's a long vowel sound. And then block. Once again, we have the long spelling because it comes right after short vowel. So there was a question about magic E of when to use double E versus E consonant E. E consonant E is extraordinarily rare. You will almost never see it. I think there's something like 40 words that have it. I am going to talk about EE and EA in a little bit, but if given a choice, E consonant E, I wouldn't use over EE. Okay, our controlled vowels. This can get hairy, and I'm not even going to lie about it. So when you have a vowel that's followed by an R, it's called an R-controlled vowel. Some people call it vowel R. The R is going to alter the sound of the vowel. So this is one sound. AR, OR, IR, ER are all one sound. The easiest one to teach is AR. AR represents R, like in bark, farm, park. It's pretty stable unless a W comes before it, like warm, W messes up everything. Now, OR. OR represents the OR sound, like in torn. And ORE also represents the OR sound when it's the final sound in a word. So if words like chore and bore and more, the or sound comes at the end of a word. So we're going to use the ORE. If you're sitting here thinking right now, oh my gosh, this is a lot of stuff to remember. It is. I'm going over this really fast and I'm realizing as I'm doing it how much stuff this is. But keep in mind, this isn't a quarter's worth of phonics knowledge. This isn't even a year's worth of phonics knowledge. This is going to be multiple years of your child's education. And I'm just trying to give you a brief overview on some things that I think could help. And you can always come back and look at it again. Now, the worst part is ER, IR, and UR. Yes, this is recorded and you can watch it anytime. It will also be on YouTube. So ER, IR, and UR are the troublemakers because they all represent the sound. So it presents a problem for spelling, not so much a problem for reading. I will say that ER is the most common. We add ER to the end of a verb to make a person who does that thing. So talk becomes a person who talks. If I have singer, it becomes a person who sings. Farmer is a person who farms. ER is the most common representation of the sound. IR is typically used with the oldest words in our language. IR is a really old spelling. UR, some people call these hurt words. It is a bit of a stretch, and I'm not even going to try to pretend it isn't. So it means that UR is mostly used with words that have to do with something being hurt. So like hurt is obvious, burn, burst, nurse, church you could go to if your soul is hurt, but it can be a stretch like surf and turf. So I know that a lot of you wanted an easy answer about ER, IR, and UR, but there simply isn't one. And I'm sorry about that. But keep in mind, ER is the most common, IR is the oldest, and UR might have to do with some hurt words. Gentle Cindy. Okay, and once again, feel free to ask me any questions about words that do or do not play fair. Okay, Gentle Cindy is a rule for C and K. Sorry, C and G. C and G both have a hard sound and a soft sound. The hard sound of C is the typical sound. It's the K sound. The soft sound of C is the S sound. So when C is followed by an E, I, or Y, it makes the, sorry, that should say S, not C. It makes the S sound. So let me give you an example. Sent, cyst, civil. Gentle Cindy says C says S with an E, I, or Y. I learned that from my OG training. So if you follow up that C with an E, I, or Y, it's going to make a S sound. So you also see this a lot at the end of a word. So you're going to notice it a lot in Magic E. And so like if I have my children saying the word place, I could ask them, okay, there's 2 reasons why there's a Magic E on the end. Give me one of them. And they would say, oh, it's there to make the A say its name. And it's also there to soften a C. Now this goes all the way back to our very first slide where we talked about K versus C. Remember, K takes I and E, and now we know why. We cannot use a C with an E or an I, because if we did that, the C no longer says K, the C says S. So we have to use that K to represent that K sound because the C would otherwise be softened. Okay, G. When G is followed by an E, I, or Y, it usually says J. It most of the time says J. You're going to find some examples where it doesn't, but G usually softens up. So you have words like game, got, and gust. Those are that hard C. But then gent, gym, giant, those are all words where the G has been softened. You'll see it a lot at the end of words as well. Now this last one I think is pretty cool. Does anyone know why, and you can put this in the comments, why there is a U in words like guess, guys, and guest? And I'm going to give you a minute. All right, I know that I have a lag, so hopefully by the time I finish saying this, I'll have some answers. So yes, you got it. So the reason there is a U is because it keeps the G a hard sound. Absolutely. If we did not have this U here, it would be a soft G sound. So the U is this like vowel blocker that we put in there so that it keeps a hard sound. Great job, y'all. Okay. You can also do pictures of gentle Cindy. This is one that I did on the computer. You can see her eyes are E, I, Y, and you can do her ears to be a G or a C. I am down to 5 minutes, and I think I'm going to break my own rule and not end on time because I want to give you as many phonics rules as I can. So I understand if people have to leave, but I wanted to make sure that you have as much information as I can. So I think I'm just going to keep plowing on. There's not too much more left. Now, this is a huge rule, and I literally had this written on my board the entire time last year. Words in English do not end in I, U, J, or V. So what in the world does that mean for us, okay? And before you come at me, hi is a slang term, ski is Norwegian, flu is a shortened form of influenza. So words in English do not end in I, U, J, or V. So that's going to give you some insight into why words like glue and blue and clue are spelled this way. So yeah, we can teach UE represents you, but I think it's even more powerful to teach them that, hey, words in English can't end in a U. So if I'm trying to spell the word glue and I spell it G-L-U, I could say, we know that words in English do not end in U. What do we need to do? And we could add a silent E to the end. Same thing with words like pie, tie, and die. Words in English cannot end in I, so we add that silent E on the end. So this is two more reasons why we might have a silent E. So we know that we could have a silent E to make a vowel sound long, to soften a C or a G, to make a word not end in a U or an I. And here's another rule. Words in English cannot end in the letter V. So this is what I teach my kiddos. We never have a V without the E at the end of a word. If a word ends in a V sound, we have to have an E on the end. That's why we have starve, carve, have, and give, which we've been teaching as heart words for so long. After you teach them that words in English don't end in V, then it's no longer a heart word. It's a rule that they've internalized. All right, I'm getting towards the end, I promise. So why at the end of words? We just learned that words in English cannot end in the letter I. So that is why words like sky, ply, and try all end in a Y. They are being used to represent the I sound because we cannot end an English word in I. So happy, pretty, lily. Y can also represent E at the end of multisyllabic words. This one is not as neat and clean as I thought it was. Somebody on one of the big Facebook groups the other day was telling me how if the syllable before it is unaccented, I think they said, the Y can say I, but I'm not 100% sure. But in general, Y represents E at the end of multisyllabic words. All right, let's talk about DGE versus GE. Remember, we talked about how words in English can't end in I, U, V, or J. Well, we have to have something to represent the J sound. So we already know that we can make the J sound if we have a silent E on the end, right? Well, we also have another set of letters that can represent that sound, a DGE. So here's the rule for this one. Once again, we're going to use the long spelling when it comes right after a short vowel. Words like wedge and budge and badge. But you can see words like page, stage, huge. I can't use DGE because it is not right after a short vowel. And you're going to notice that this D, kind of like the U, it almost acts as this blocker because we know that E can jump over one letter to make a vowel say its name. So if this D wasn't here, the E would be able to jump over the G and make this say weege. So it's really cool when you get into the specifics of it and you're like, whoa, why did nobody teach me this? All right, we are going to talk about a couple of vowel teams. AI represents A when it's in the middle of a word, the beginning or middle. AY represents A at the end of a word. Remember, we can't end an English word in I, so we have to have a different way to represent it. And we use that with an AY. So AI represents A in the beginning or middle. AY represents A at the end. Now, it's so funny that Stacy, you asked this because I kind of yelled in the middle right here. So EE and EA, when we get to these vowel teams, it gets so tricky because there are so many options. So EE and EA can both represent E. And honestly, as far as I know, there is no good way to tell the difference. Once again, it doesn't present a problem for reading, it presents a problem for spelling. In that Google folder that I'm going to share with you, I'll put it in the description of this once this is over. I found this article and it's a vowel frequency chart. So you'll be able to see like, okay, well, which of these comes up more often? And that might help you with your planning for children. So how do we teach our kids the difference? This is what I do. When I have kids and say they're trying to spell the word feel and they spell it F-E-A-L, and I'm like singing from the rooftops, so happy about it, right? That's such a smart thing to do. I say, you are absolutely right. EE does represent the E sound. What other ways do you know to represent the E sound? Megan, it looks like you and I have the exact same thought. Yep. So, all right, now IGH. IGH is a special vowel team because IGH represents I in the middle before T, where it's like light and bright and tight. There's a couple of notable exceptions, and that's sigh and high. But in general, IGH represents I in the middle before T. So if I had a kid who spelled ILITE as light, I would be like, that is so smart. You are right. I consonant E does say I. What do we know though represents the I sound before T? And that's when they're like, oh, that's right. It's an IGH. So OA. OA can represent O in the beginning or in the middle of a word. So this one is where it gets really tricky because like road, R-O-A-D, and R-O-D-E are both words, right? So it's once again one of those things where you have to encourage them, except there are some places where it cannot be an O consonant E. So if I had a kid spell toast, T-O-S-T-E, I would say that's great thinking. But how many letters can E jump over? And they were like, oh, it can only jump over one. Okay, so what's another way we know we can make that O sound? Diphthongs, OU versus OW. OU represents ow in the middle. OW represents ow at the end. Once again, we're going back to words in English do not end in I, U, J, or V. So, ouch, that's perfect for in the middle of a word, but we have to figure something else out for the end of a word. So that's why we have things like cow, plow, and how, because OW represents the O at the end. And this happens to be a place where W would represent a vowel. And fun fact, I asked the person who trained me in Orton Gillingham, and she said, technically, you can consider G and H a vowel or a semi-vowel in the IGHs. Okay, so I think this might be the last one. I added this one because somebody had said that they wanted to have it, so I wanted to make sure we had it in there. There are 3 sounds that ED can make. The suffix ED is added to the end of a verb to make it past tense. ED represents id after a T or a D. So land, if I add ED, it says id. Land, id. Cart, id. Start, id. You will have to do a lot of practice with your children because they're going to write ID. It's phonetically how it sounds. They're going to write ID. Now, ED represents the D after a voiced consonant. Goes back to voiced versus voiceless. Yelled, posed, filmed. ED represents T when it comes after a voiceless consonant. Now, this is one of the earliest examples of morphology that we teach to our children. This is an example when we need to have them think about the meaning of the word that they're spelling. So if I have a child that spells yelled, Y-E-L-L-D, that makes sense unless you're thinking about the meaning. And we would say, if you are trying to make this mean that you did it in the past, what suffix do we have to make it mean that we did it in the past? And I think that that's the way that we should guide our students when it comes to the sounds, because once you get to morphology, you really want them to be thinking about the meaning. Our language preserves meaning over all else. Right. So I've given you so much stuff right now, and I am almost done. And I'm going to stop sharing again for just a second because I wanted to point something out. So a lot of people will say there are too many words in the English language. Why would we spend our time teaching this to kids, right? But what's the other option? If we don't take the time to teach our children the way our language works, what's the other option? To expect them to just get it? We know some kids will, 40% of our kids will, but where does that leave the rest of our children? I don't know if we have to get into the specifics of every single rule in English. I think it's kind of cool, but I don't know if we need that. But we have to teach them these rules because they won't just pick it up on their own. So just keep in mind whenever you hear somebody saying that there's no point in phonics rules because there's too many, I really want to know what the other option is. Like guessing, I guess? I don't know. All right, so let's just talk for maybe 2 or 3 minutes about how we can make it stick. And then I will do a giveaway as a thank you for sticking around on a Wednesday night. All right, so the number one thing that I am recognizing our children need to make this stick is authentic practice. We have got to give our children plenty of opportunities to practice reading and spelling these words if we ever want them to get it. So I use a phonics notebook, and I will show you that. I use decodable text. I use dictation, and then we practice, 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 practice. If children aren't getting it, before we ask ourselves if there's something wrong, I want us to ask ourselves if we've given them ample opportunity to figure this out in text and in spelling, because we know some children will learn to orthographically map words with 1 to 4 exposures, but that's not all children, and all children deserve the chance to get to learn to read. So try to give them as many exposures to these words as possible. Something that has changed my instruction has been daily review. Every day, and time is short for me, so I don't do both every day, but every day we either review reading or we review spelling. For review reading, we might reread decodables that we've already read. I have decks of cards that I use that we read that have the different patterns that I've taught. We might do fluency grids, but you want something that's going to incorporate all the skills you've already taught them, because otherwise they're going to forget it. And then spelling, you've got to give your children opportunities to spell. I was raised to believe that dictation was like a bad thing, like, oh, how would we just sit there and tell kids to spell a word? Because they need to learn to spell. Dictation of sentences and words is a really powerful tool, using phoneme graphing spelling in order to help see how our sounds map to the symbols. And then you can also use things that are visual representations, things like posters and sound walls. The tools for reading sound wall comes with those grapheme cards. I am going to show you a couple of things that I've made. Keep in mind, I am a reading interventionist, and so the things that I make are things that I needed for my own classroom. So one thing that I do have, and I'll put the link into the comments and into the I'll put the link in the comments and into the description, is I've made these phonics posters that have all the rules written on them. I really like them because they have full color pages, but then I also have these little half sheets. It's the exact same thing, but in a half a sheet in black and white, so kids can glue it into their phonics notebook. Also, when I'm introducing a new word, I also use a phonics notebook for my kiddos. So this, or a new graph theme. So all of my kiddos have this phonics notebook where we introduce a word and then where we do some practice with it. So those are two tools that I have. I will put the links into the comments and I will, share it with you. So before we leave, thank you for staying with me an extra 10 minutes. It is time for me to do my giveaway. So I'm gonna, before I do that, I'm gonna put the link to my bundle in the comments that has all of those things. And then I'll also put it in the description. Okay, in order to win, and this is going to be who answers my question, okay? The 5th person who answers my question that pops up on my side, okay, is gonna win both of those books. So here's my question for you. It's a little pop quiz at the end of this. Name 2 reasons we might have a silent E at the end of a word. So 5th person on my side. 2 reasons we use a magic E. Yeah. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. It came really fast. Okay, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Allison Kalenda. I will message you. You were the 5th person. That is fantastic. All right, friends, I am so grateful for you for being here. If you have questions about any words or anything at all, you can always message me. I'm very grateful for you and for this community, and I hope you have a great night. Thank you.